I'm up from Raleigh, North Carolina, so I'm going to refer to you all as y'all. Although I did spend a long time in New York, so you might hear a you guys also. But it's great to be here in front of you. Like she said, there is the human side of everything that we do, and in business these days, everybody wants to be data-driven. They want to see numbers and charts and as much data as possible from your systems and your tech. But then there's also, we've heard a lot today about best practices, right? What is everybody else doing? What's the gold standard? In most companies that I've worked in too, just a lot about, what are our competitors doing? Oh my gosh, we had this idea and our competitor now just came out with it beforehand. We're behind. Things like that you tend to go to for how you evolve your business, how you try to bring new ideas to market. And oftentimes that just sort of misses that human side of it at the center of human-centered design and design thinking, which is so critical to customer experience. Because after all, these are people that we're selling to, right? They're people that have jobs, they have their own needs, they have their own pains. I like to sort of shape the narrative around human-centered design as different from innovation with a great case study about a group of students from the Stanford Design School, also known as the D School. And these students, it was like a cross-functional group, one MBA, some engineer, somebody in some other practice, all come together. They go through this program called the D School to learn how to develop empathy for people and design new solutions for problems, right? That's the whole focus of the school. So they had a project where they were looking at third world countries and this problem, which is actually pretty significant. 1 out of 10 babies or something like that every year are born preterm. So 15 million around the world, and half of those are in India. So they're looking at this problem, and sort of the nature of the work they're trying to do is, what can we do to address this, right? So one of the key things that they learned as they're going through this sort of outside, looking in, how can we address this problem, is that there's a shortage of incubators in the hospitals that are sort of in the urban centers that serve a lot of people from the rural parts of third world countries. Shortage of incubators, oftentimes they can be very costly relative to that society. So their first question, or the first problem that they sought to address, was this idea of, maybe we can improve the cost, reduce the cost of this, right? Make it more affordable for those hospitals so that there can be more and you can serve more preterm infants, which sounds like a really, really great, right? To be able to reduce the cost of this really expensive thing, super innovative. Right, and that's a great example of innovation in that they've taken something that exists and they are looking to improve it in some way through technology or whatnot. But because they are part of this design thinking program, which is fundamentally different than something like just simple innovation strategy, what they did is unique to this type of practice, which is they got out of the walls of their campus and they went over to Nepal and India, and they met with the people that were having these, preterm babies. They lived in the villages. They developed empathy for what they were going through, and in that experience, what they discovered was that most of these people that are having this challenge of these high death rates from preterm can never even get to a hospital. right? They don't have means to travel, a way to travel to a hospital. Therefore, the idea of having lower cost incubators just doesn't impact them at all, right? So they asked a different question, going back to the idea of the, reduce the cost question, reframing this in a way that says, how can we create a baby warming device that helps parents in remote villages give dying infants a chance to survive? And when you look at the nature of this type of question versus the other more technical challenge, product feature-based question of a lower cost incubator, fundamentally different in how you might approach solving this problem. The result of this was they ended up creating the Embrace Infant Warmer. And after they finished their program, they've gone on to start this company, and over the course of a decade or so, have helped like 300,000 babies or whatnot. But the reason that I like to tell this story is because this is actually what got me so interested in design thinking in the first place, and why I decided to pursue that as an area of practice and study, and bring it into the organizations that I work with. So it's a great case study. I definitely recommend you look at this and other that come out of IDEO and the design school if you want to learn more about the fundamentals. So I'm just gonna share a few techniques. There's not a big overarching anything to this presentation other than just sharing some tips and techniques that I've found successful. But this first one being, ask a more beautiful question. So you saw the difference in the two types of questions that these students could have used to approach their solutions to problems. And real quick, before I go into that and the other techniques, just a reason of, why should you care about design thinking? Because everybody likes why should you care, right? So there's this institute called the Design Management Institute, and they did a study. I think they updated, but their SEO is not very good, so it's hard to find their recent stuff. But basically, design-centric companies outperform the market by over 200%. There you go. Now, when you go to your management and say, we should start doing human-centered design, that's how you show them. There's a lot of different charts that sort of illustrate what design thinking should look like. A lot of it starts with, insights, ideation, develop, prototype, test, all that stuff. But what I like about this one in particular is it shows the messiness of it, because it's not a practice that's necessarily for the faint of heart when it comes to organization and checklists and clean processes and stuff like that. It's very messy, very collaborative, very real world, tangible process that can be a lot of fun too when you go through it. But this idea of the visual aspect of it too is one of the things. I don't know for how many other marketers this is true, but I tell people that if I could do all of my work without a computer, I totally would. Like just sticky notes and whiteboards and all that stuff, I'd totally be fine. So back to this idea of the more beautiful question. So there's a spectrum of, what's a bad question, it's too broad, this or that, what's too specific and just right. This comes from IDEO. But this example of, how might we improve air travel? That's a big loaded question. But then how might we make air travel more delightful and convenient for parents and children, is a little more specific. It puts the person in there. It's talking about the parents and children. It's talking about what incremental improvement we want to make about air travel, right? But it's not too specific like the example at the bottom. So a few years back, this is when I was at Lenovo at the time, working on a product that I just had to take over, and I was at a conference. It was heavily B2C focused. Excuse me. Heavily B2C focused marketing conference, and it was amazing to see just how innovative all these retail companies were being about their customer experience. Thank you. Is that okay? Is this okay? So I came back to the team with this question of, how might we apply these more engaging consumer experiences to the B2B buyer's journey. And one of the main experiences that retail companies were, thank you so much, exploring with at that time was virtual reality. So based on that question and several months of exploration, we ended up producing a virtual reality experience for a major trade show. I'm sure you all know about Gartner and CIO Symposium. And it was like nothing else that I'd seen before when it comes to an on-site experience with, interacting with customers. We had like over 500 CIOs come through, on average spending 12 to 15 minutes with us, getting completely lost in just this world that we built around some of the different types of challenges that they were trying to solve and things like that. It's a cool experience, but the main takeaway was that it would have been a great idea from anybody to just come say, hey, I've got a cool idea. But the fact that it started with a question of, applying a B2C experience to the B2B buyer's journey is where it all came from, right? It wasn't about somebody had a great idea. It was more, there was a really good question to start with. On that note of getting started in this space, along with asking your really good questions, design thinking and going through this type of practice is not for everybody. A lot of people will just kind of say, I just want to do things the way that I do them, or processes aren't for them. I don't like new processes, frameworks, models, stuff like that. So what I did at Lenovo in the face of that was create a community, which over time grew to be about 200 people that would get together and apply some of these practices to each other's works, sort of like an ad hoc community, because it wasn't top down. There was no executives saying, hey, we're going to institute this as a practice. So I brought it in and built this out. So I definitely encourage, if you want to adopt something like design thinking, finding other like-minded people inside your organization that you can work with. So a few tips, and then I'll wrap it up. So interviewing, which as product marketers, I'm sure you all do a lot for personas and things like that. But applying that same sort of idea of the question to interviews, I worked on a project for a couple years, bringing a new product to market. And it all started with interviews with small businesses, and I would just sit there and ask the same question over and over. Tell me about the last time you bought a new digital tool. And these stories over and over from people about the pains and the challenges led to the development of a problem theory that basically finding, buying, and owning business apps is hard. And after hearing it over and over again, we really started to see this for ourselves too. And there was a whole life cycle of going through these things. But where it really became interesting is applying another technique once you have this sort of problem theory or seed, the thing that's going to grow is what some call outside worlds, which is where you take this challenge, you take this problem, and you go explore it in different contexts or different settings. So in this case, I was at a conference, not for CIOs. It's not our target audience at all. It was a conference somewhat like this, but thousands of people with serious decisions. And everybody was talking about this thing called tech stacks. So y'all have probably seen this type of chart too. Using it as a way to communicate the business value that they get from all these different tools they use. So this whole new nomenclature, it's people talking about how they'd solved this problem, which led to some exercises on site. This was a paper prototype of a new product concept there called AirStack, which was sort of an evolution of a product that we were trying to breathe new life into, this more IT-facing product. So, I sketched this out, took maybe 5 minutes to get the idea down. But the great thing about being on site at that conference with all those people is that I could go get live feedback rapidly. So within 30 minutes, what was just a small drawing had turned into different types of value propositions, sales objections, who might the stakeholders be, what are different use cases for this concept. And ultimately that ended up coming to life, and there was a whole launch process around it. As AirStack. So the gist of the story, the couple techniques, is all started with that question of, I just want to understand, what is it like for you to buy software? And the nature of the question was not to say we want to develop some new product, but the nature of the question was actually we wanted to learn how to sell you software better. But what happened instead was that we created something that could help them solve that problem. On the notion of prototyping, so there's a couple recent events that I've done in Raleigh that have been really fun. One with NC State that we called Moonshots, which is where they wanted to reverse engineer the solutions to big, meaty problems that they're trying to address in the next 10 years. So in this case, this is bringing together kind of cross-functional people to solve these types of issues with healthcare and things like that. Can be a good setting for prototyping, as well as another organization that I've worked with, Walk West, spent months and months developing empathy for their potential buyers, and then went into a sort of like a design sprint, like a 96-hour website redesign process. So when you're thinking about going from insights and empathy to prototyping, there's a couple different flavors of ways you could go about it. So there's a lot of resources on this stuff, but just so you know that there's a lot of different options. This technique, Think Aloud testing, is super fun because you realize that any product that you have can be made with Post-it notes and a wall and paper, where you get people to try to do the job they're trying to do, but while they're talking out loud about it, so you're able to hear exactly what's going on in their minds, and then you're able to see how they would interact naturally with the world around them if it wasn't for some product design that gets in their way, right? Buy a feature. This is the CMO of Sugar CRM, and I was fortunate to have her as a participant when we were doing research on this. But this is a fun exercise that I adapted from another organization. Buy a feature where, take a lot of different value propositions, had a stack of paper printed out that said you can place any of these pricing models on any of these value propositions. not that you would price a product in this way, but this sort of interactive way to see how people think about the money and the value that they get from things brought a lot of insight back to our organization. Our final pricing looked very different, but it's fun too. It's fun, especially when the buyers are like, I really love this exercise. I want to do more of this. And so the last one that I'll talk about today is walk a mile technique. So everybody knows the adage of walking a mile in someone else's shoes. And the first thing when I joined TiVo recently was a whole different industry for me. First thing that I did was reach out online and just see, like, okay, I need to learn more about why people care about entertainment, because I know that we love binge watching and all of our favorite shows and all that stuff. But I reached out to the community online and just said, can I, come watch TV with you and your family? Because if you're, in this idea of customer empathy and design thinking, it really is, it's about being there with the people, right? It's like I said at the beginning, you can't read stats and have the kind of insights that come out of customer empathy. So this is the process I've been going through for the last couple of months, just because I think as a product marketer, to be the one that understands the customer the most is the most valuable thing that you can do for your teammates. So I was actually really surprised to get a lot of great responses from people that said, yes, you can come over to my family, come over and watch TV with my family. So just a couple of takeaways. So human-centered design, I always try to say it's a practice, not a process. It's not a checklist that you follow. It's just things that you do. I've just shared a few out of a lot more different things you can instill in your work. You've got to frame the right problem. It's very visual, tactile. That's one of the things I love about it. And getting back in front of people quickly and often. There's a lot of resources in the backup here that I assume they'll share this stuff, but some books and things you can buy that can help you out. But if anybody wants to talk more about this stuff, I'll do just like custom webinars for different teams. I love talking about problems and seeing how we can develop strategies and stuff like that. So thank you, Shireen.
Yes, thank you. Any questions for Eric? We do have a couple minutes around design thinking or questions to ask in research.
Hi.
Hey.
So when you were introducing human-centered design thinking in your organization, whether it was TiVo or previously, what was the biggest challenge you incurred when you started to break it down?
So the biggest challenge I would say was that everybody wanted it, but nobody knew how to get it. So a ton of interest, people saying, I want to bring this to my team, I want to do this, but without some executive mandate, there was a little bit of stagnation for people. And these would be people that were in, otherwise somewhat leadership-oriented roles, saying, I would like to create this new practice with my team, and they would bring their team to these events and things like that. But getting that momentum of someone being enabled to say, I'm going to start doing this, we're going to start doing this without permission was one of the, It's interesting to see how often people need permission to try something new. Yeah.
So how did you overcome it? Did you just keep trucking on and in terms of like getting buy-in? So I understand that without permission it's the biggest challenge, but was it just a matter of getting that buy-in and like kind of continuing to?
Yeah. So in this case, you have someone who is looking for buy-in, but then in other cases, other teams, it was just, okay, we're going to start doing this, right? So sort of on a case-by-case basis. I think it just comes down to who's at the helm of those different teams. Yeah.
Any other questions? Something, oh, back here.
Hey, thank you for that presentation. Quick question. So IBM was on that list of design thinking companies,
Yeah.
and I've actually been in those studios. It's really amazing to be part of
Yeah.
that process. A lot of that information gets used for the users who are actually using the products,
Yeah.
and not so much for the buyers.
Sure.
So my question is, what are your recommendations for bringing that information, that great valuable information, into the buyer's process, into the messaging positioning process?
Yeah, that's why I think it's so interesting as a product marketing function instead of like you're describing. User experience is often the group that owns this idea of design thinking. And so, I mean, my recommendation is just as product marketing, our focus is not so much on the end user and it is more on the buyer. So it's different because you're not analyzing something tangible like usage or tactile experience, but you're analyzing something holistic, like a journey of how might your buyer be trying to solve this problem already today. All right, so that's just one example. If you have access to the types of buyers that you're trying to sell to or think you might, being able to get at that level when you're developing empathy for them around those problems and what are the myriad ways that they're trying to solve them today? What are the experiences they're going through in that solution of the problem can be as tangible as product design in a way. It's just a different context, it's more abstract.
Great, thank you, Eric.